The first night the temperature dropped below freezing, I woke up because my own breath had turned to frost on the blanket over my face. Not the window, the blanket. I could see it in the streetlight, little white crystals an inch from my mouth. That was the night I stopped waiting to be rescued. Here is what I know now that I did not know then. A cold, rusted trailer that everyone told me to walk away from became the warmest, safest home I have had in years, and the fix that saved my life cost me $40. This is a true story. It is my story. And it matters because I was one of the people the world had already decided to stop counting. Stay with me, because near the end I am going to tell you about the one discarded thing I stuffed into the walls of that trailer, the thing that took a box on wheels that dropped to 19 degrees inside and held it near 60 overnight with no furnace running. You do not need land, you do not need savings, you do not need anyone's permission. I did this with almost nothing in my pocket and a body that was tired of being cold. Let me take you back to how I got there, because I want you to see it the way I lived it, one rung at a time. I had been sleeping in my car for 11 weeks when the car finally quit. 11 weeks. I remember because I had been counting them on a receipt I kept in the glove box, one tally mark for every Sunday. The transmission went on a Tuesday in a grocery store parking lot, and I sat there with my hands on the wheel and understood that the metal room I had been living in was now just metal. No heat, no moving. A dead thing I was sitting inside. That is the part nobody tells you about losing your housing. It does not happen all at once. It happens in stages, and each stage takes a little more of your dignity, and you keep thinking there is a bottom, and then you find out there is a lower floor under that one. I had a little money, not real money. I had $230 that I had been guarding like it was oxygen, because in a way it was. And I had a phone with a cracked screen and a data plan I was one payment away from losing. So I did what a lot of people do at the bottom. I started searching free listings and classified ads at 2 in the morning because that is when the fear is loudest and sleep will not come. That is where I found it. A listing with 3 blurry photos. An old utility trailer, the enclosed kind, the box-shaped people haul lawnmowers and furniture in. The floor was rotted in one corner. The door hinge was rusted through. The man selling it had listed it for $75 and written in all capital letters that it was, quote, junk, and he just wanted it gone. He had already dropped the price twice. I want you to understand something about that moment. I was not excited. I was not inspired. I looked at those photos and I felt sick, because some part of me was doing math I did not want to do, and the math said, that box has walls and a roof and a door that locks, and your car does not move anymore. A rusted trailer that a stranger called junk was, right then, a step up in the world for me. Sit with how that feels. Because that is where a lot of people are right now, and they are ashamed of it, and they should not be. I texted him. My hands were shaking, partly from cold and partly from something else. I offered him $50 and a promise that I would tow it away myself, which was a lie, because I had no way to tow anything. He said, come get it Saturday. I had 4 days to figure out the impossible. But before I tell you how I got that trailer moved, I need to tell you about the people who watched me sink, because that part shaped everything that came after. There was a woman at the pharmacy where I used to pick up my prescriptions before I lost my insurance. She had known me for years. And the last time I went in, hollow-eyed, wearing the same coat I had worn for a week, she looked at me the way you look at a stain on a carpet. Not cruel exactly. Worse than cruel. Dismissive. Like I had become a category instead of a person. Like whatever had happened to me was a thing I had earned through some laziness she could smell on me. I have thought about that look 1,000 times, and here's what I finally figured out. The look was not really about me, it was about her. Because if my falling was my own fault, then she was safe. Then it could never happen to her. The people who look down on you when you are down are usually just terrified of how close they are to the same edge. They need you to be different from them. You are not. You are one bad month away from each other, and they know it, and that is exactly why they cannot look at you. I let that look sit in my chest for a long time, and then, somewhere in those 11 weeks in the car, it turned into something else. It turned into fuel, because I decided I was not going to be a cautionary tale for comfortable people. I was going to figure this out, and I was going to figure it out with the exact scraps the world throws away, the same scraps they had decided I was. So, Saturday came. I got the trailer moved by asking a man who ran a small towing service if he would move it in exchange for me cleaning his office for a month. He said yes. Mm. People will surprise you when you stop performing shame and just ask plainly for what you need. I learned that the hard way, and it is one of the most valuable things I own now. He towed that rusted box to a corner of a friend's rural property, a friend who let me park it there in exchange for helping with her chickens and her garden. That is important, so I am going to say it clearly. I did not own land. I did not rent land. I traded my labor for a place to set the trailer down. If you are sitting there thinking you can never do this because you do not own dirt, I am telling you, I did not own dirt either. There are people with empty backlots, backfields, unused corners who would rather have a reliable person nearby than an empty patch of weeds. You have to be willing to ask, and you have to be willing to actually help. Now the trailer was mine, and it was parked, and it was a disaster. Let me tell you exactly what I was working with, because the specifics are the whole point. It was a single axle enclosed cargo trailer, about 10 feet long inside and a little under 6 feet wide. The walls were thin, aluminum sheeting over a wood frame. There was no insulation, none. When I stood inside it that first day and knocked on the wall, it sounded like a tin can, and it felt like one too. The metal was so cold it hurt to touch with a bare hand. The rotted corner of the floor let daylight through, a hole about the size of a dinner plate. The door had a gap along the top edge you could slide 2 fingers through. I bought a cheap indoor-outdoor thermometer for $4, the little digital kind, and I stuck it inside. That first night, with me in it wrapped in every blanket I owned, the inside temperature read 19 degrees, the outside read 17. 2 degrees of difference. My tin can was doing almost nothing. I might as well have been sleeping outside. That is the moment most people quit. That is the moment the world is betting you quit. And I want to tell you what I did instead, because everything I did was cheap, and everything I did was findable, and none of it required a single skill I was born with. I started with the hole in the floor, because you cannot heat a room with a hole letting cold air pour up from underneath. I did not have money for lumber. So I went to a construction site dumpster, the kind you see outside houses being renovated, and I asked the foreman if I could take scrap. Always ask. I have never once been told no when I looked a man in the eye and said, I am trying to fix up a place to live and I need your throwaways. He waved me toward the pile. I pulled out broken pieces of plywood and a chunk of foil-faced foam board insulation, the rigid kind. That foam board is the hero of this whole story, so remember it. It is called polyisocyanurate, but nobody says that. People call it polyiso or just foil board. What matters is the number on it. Each inch of that foam gives you about 6 points of what they call R value, which is just a measure of how well something stops heat from escaping. 6 per inch. That is one of the best numbers you can get from anything cheap, and people throw pounds of it away every single day on job sites because the scraps are too small for the builders to bother with. I cut a piece of plywood to cover the hole and screwed it down over a bed of that foam. Suddenly, the floor was solid, and it was warm underfoot instead of a wind tunnel. 1 rung climbed. But the walls were still tin, and the door still had that gap, and I could feel the next problem breathing down my neck, because the real cold, the deep February cold, had not even arrived yet. Here is where the $40 comes in, and I want to break it down to the penny, because vague inspiration helped me never, but exact numbers changed my life. I went to a hardware store with a plan I had built from reading everything I could find from people who had done this before me. People in cold climate off-grid forums who had frozen and learned and written it down for strangers. I bought 2 things that day. The first was a roll of reflective bubble insulation, the kind that looks like foil-covered bubble wrap. It ran me about $18 for a roll big enough to line the walls of that little trailer. On its own, that reflective layer is not a miracle, but it does one specific thing that matters enormously in a metal box. It reflects your radiant heat back at you instead of letting the cold metal drink it. Your body and any heat source throw out invisible warmth, and that foil bounces it back inside instead of losing it to the aluminum. The second thing was window insulation film, the shrink kind you put up and heat with a hairdryer so it goes tight and clear, and a couple of rolls of foam, weather stripping, and rope caulk. All of that together came to about $12. I already had a utility knife and a roll of foil tape from the same dumpster run. Now add it up. $18 of reflective insulation, $12 of ceiling supplies. The foam board and plywood were free from the dumpster. A tube of construction adhesive was about $6. A few dollars of screws. It landed right around $40. $40 turned a 17-degree tin can into something I could survive, and then into something I could actually live in. And everything I learned the hard way, the gaps, the foam board, the cocoon, the exact order it all has to happen, I wrote down so you would never have to figure it out alone at 2 in the morning the way I did. That became a book called Built from Nothing, and it is part of a series I put together called First Shelter and Build Deeper, written for exactly the person I used to be, the one with almost nothing, trying to make something hold heat and hold a life. If that is you, the link is in the description at shelterfromnothing.com, and the whole series is $97, which I priced the way I wish someone had priced something for me back then, worth every number, no fluff, just the real thing. But let me get back to exactly what I did next, because the order matters more than anything. Let me tell you exactly how, because the order matters. First, I sealed every gap. This is the step people skip, and it is the most important and the cheapest. I ran my hands slowly along every seam on a windy day and felt for the cold streams of air coming in. The door gap, the corners, around the little vent. Wherever I felt air move, I stuffed rope caulk, which is like a soft clay worm you press into cracks with your thumb, and I ran foam weather stripping around the door. A house or a trailer loses a shocking amount of heat just through air leaks, not through the walls themselves. Sealing those gaps cost me a few dollars, and it made more difference than anything else in that first week. Then I lined the walls. I glued the reflective bubble insulation to the inside of every wall and the ceiling with the construction adhesive, foil side facing in toward me, and taped the seams with foil tape so it became one continuous shell. The whole inside of the trailer went silver, like the inside of a thermos. That is exactly the idea. A thermos keeps coffee hot with a reflective lining, and I had just built a thermos big enough to sleep in. Over the reflective layer, on the walls where I had enough scrap, I fit pieces of that free foil-faced foam board, wedged and glued into place. Remember, 6 points of insulation value per inch. 2 inches of it against a wall that started at basically 0 was a transformation you could feel with your hand within a day. That night I checked my $4 thermometer. Outside it was 15 degrees. Inside, with just my own body heat and a single small candle lantern for a little glow, it read 41 degrees. From 2 degrees of difference to 26 degrees of difference. I had not added a furnace. I had not spent real money. I had just stopped throwing my own warmth away. I sat on my cot in that silver box and I cried. And for the first time in a long time, it was not the bad kind of crying. But 41 degrees is not warm. 41 degrees is survivable, not comfortable, and I knew the meanest part of winter was still coming. So I want to stop right here and talk directly to one person watching this. If you are listening to me and thinking, that is fine for her, but I have nothing, I have no dumpster to raid, no trailer, no friend with land, no $40 to spare this week, then this next part is for you specifically, and I mean that. I have been exactly where you are, guarding $230 like it was my last breath, and I am not going to hand you a fantasy. So here is the one thing you can start with this week with almost nothing. Warmth is not about heating a big space. It is about not losing the heat your own body already makes. Your body is a furnace. It throws off heat all night long for free. The entire game, the whole secret, is trapping that heat in a small enough space that it actually builds up around you instead of escaping into a big cold room. You can start tonight, wherever you are, even in a car, even in a room you cannot afford to heat, with things people give away or throw out. Moving blankets, the thick quilted furniture pads that moving companies and hardware stores sell cheap and that people discard constantly, have real insulation value when you layer them. Cardboard, flattened and layered, traps air and blocks cold coming up from the ground, and cardboard is everywhere, and it is free. A single roll of that window shrink film over a drafty window is a few dollars and stops a river of cold air. None of this requires you to own anything or ask anyone's permission. It just requires you to stop believing that warmth belongs only to people with money. It does not. Warmth is physics, and physics does not check your bank account. I lived at 41 degrees for about 2 weeks while I hunted for the last piece, the piece that would take me from surviving to actually being warm, and I found it in the most ordinary place imaginable. This is the secret I promised you at the start, so lean in. I was reading late one night, the way I always was, through the accounts of people who had wintered in uninsulated cabins and vans, and, yes, trailers, in genuinely brutal cold, places that hit 20 and 30 below, and the same idea kept surfacing from people who had actually survived it, not people selling anything. The idea was this: do not try to heat the whole space. Build a small room inside the room, build a warm pocket just big enough for your body, and let your own heat fill it. They called it different things: a bed tent, a sleeping cocoon. Some just called it a box bed, the way poor people in cold countries built enclosed wooden bed boxes with a curtain a couple hundred years ago, because they could not heat the whole house either. It is old, old wisdom, and the world forgot it because the world got furnaces, but it never stopped working. So here is exactly what I did, and it cost me almost nothing because I built it from things I already had and things people had thrown away. I took those free moving blankets, the thick quilted pads, and I hung them from the ceiling of the trailer to close off just the corner where my cot was, making a little curtained pocket, maybe 4 feet by 6 feet. I lined the inside of that pocket with the last of my reflective bubble insulation, foil facing in. I put a layer of flattened cardboard and a cheap foam sleeping pad under the mattress because you lose more heat down into a cold surface than you ever lose to the air. And that was it. A tiny reflective blanket-walled cocoon inside the already insulated trailer. Then I did one more thing, the cheapest trick of all. Before bed, I heated water on a small single-burner camp stove and filled a hard plastic bottle with it, wrapped it in a sock, and put it at the foot of the cocoon. One bottle of hot water, radiating slowly for hours, inside a tiny reflective space that trapped my body heat, changed everything. That night, it was 19 degrees outside. Inside the trailer, the main space read 44. But inside my little cocoon, with my body and that one bottle of warm water, it held at 59 degrees until morning. 19 outside, 59 where I slept. A 40-degree difference, with no furnace, no electricity, no gas bill, no money, built from moving blankets and cardboard and a bottle of hot water inside a $40 shell. I slept without frost on my face for the first time all winter. I woke up and I was not clenched, my hands worked, and I lay there in that warm little pocket, and I thought about the woman at the pharmacy and the man who called this trailer junk, and I understood that they had all been measuring the wrong thing. They thought a home was something you buy. A home is heat you refuse to waste, and a lock on a door, and the stubbornness to not freeze just because someone decided you were the kind of person who freezes. That cocoon method is thousands of years old, and it is free, and it works down to temperatures that would scare you, and almost nobody talks about it because you cannot sell it. There is no product. There is just you and your own warmth and a small enough space to keep it in. That is the finale I promised, and I gave it to you plain, the way I wish someone had given it to me during those 11 weeks in the car. I lived in that trailer through the rest of that winter and 2 winters after. I patched the roof with more scrap. I added a proper little vented heat source once I had steadier money, and I sealed and reflected and layered until that 10-foot tin can held heat better than an apartment I had once paid $900 a month for. The foil board, the reflective lining, the sealed gaps, the cocoon, $40 and a refusal to quit. What I want you to walk away with is not a set of instructions, though I gave you those too. It is this feeling. You are not the stain on the carpet that frightened woman saw. You are the person who can take the thing the world called junk and make it hold heat and hold a life. That is not a lesser thing. That might be the realest thing there is. So let me ask you something, and I am asking you directly, because I know you are the kind of person who watches all the way to the end, and that already tells me you refuse to be written off. What is the one space in your life right now that you would seal and warm first? Is it a car, a spare room you cannot afford to heat, a camper, a shed, a trailer like mine? Tell me in the comments, and tell me where you are watching from, because I read them and because someone else scrolling at 2 in the morning, scared the way I was scared, needs to see that they are not the only one. Say it out loud in that comment box. It helps more than you know. And if any part of this reached you, Stay with me here, because this is not a channel. It is a group of people rebuilding a home and their dignity out of exactly what everyone else discarded. There are more of us than you think, and we are not ashamed anymore. The next story I am going to tell you is about a woman who turned a leaking, abandoned camper that the bank would not even haul away into something warmer than the house that foreclosed on her, and the single $15 thing she found in a farm supply store that made it possible. I do not want you to miss that one. You were never the person they decided you were. You were always the person who could figure it out. I did, and now you know exactly how. There's a lot more to this than I could fit here. Inside my membership, The Shelter Builders, I walk you through the whole wall insulation method right where this video left off. You can ask me your own questions, and a real person, me, answers you myself. You're not alone, so many off-grid folks like you are already inside. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen. Cancel anytime with one click. Now, if that little trailer fix touched you, wait until you see what $500 can do. I'll show you how I built a warm, safe home on wheels for a mother in need. It's starting right here.